Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Diverse Thinking, Different Learning podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. We often talk about accommodations and modifications in education for students with learning differences. We talk about how to adjust the learning environment to help students succeed. But what if we could go deeper? What if instead of just making changes to support learning, we could actually help facilitate cognitive change? Well, my guest today is Shelley Woon, an experienced educator, school leader, and expert in the intersection of neuroplasticity in learning. With over 30 years of experience in special education, leadership, and direct work with students and families, Shelley is passionate about the brain-learning connection. As the head of school at Arrowsmith School, Shelley has witnessed firsthand how targeted interventions based on neuroplasticity can help students with learning challenges, including dyslexia, dysgraphia, and ADHD, rewire their brains to improve cognitive function. You are going to love this conversation. Let's dive in.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Hi, Shelley. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, Karen. It's great to be here.
I am so excited about our topic today. I mean, it's a great topic for our conversation. So I'm really eager to get started and talk to you about it because I know this is an area where you do a lot of work, and oftentimes parents see their kids struggling and they're seeking accommodations and modifications to the academic curriculum, but that's not a good long-term strategy for supporting students with learning challenges. So I'd love for us to kind of start and talk about why it's so important to move beyond just accommodations and modifications. Of course, they're important, but to really focus on cognitive change.
Great. Yes. So, I know you know, Karen, I'm not sure about the listeners, but I think my bio will be played. I've lived in a world where the emphasis really was on accommodations and modifications for an extended period of time. And that was my 30 years in public education. And much of the emphasis happened probably within the last 10 years of my time in public education. So for at least the past 15 years, the emphasis has been more on accommodations and modifications than interventions that promote gains for students. And now the world I'm living in is really about focusing on cognitive gains and really addressing at the foundation of where the challenges exist that are getting in the way of students' success, and that's within the brain. And so I'm excited to be sharing and talking with you today about this.
And that is such an important piece. I mean, I'm a neuropsychologist. I love the brain, study the brain, incorporate my understanding of the brain, what the research says about the brain into all of the work that I do. And accommodations, like I was saying, and the modifications are important to make sure that kids are accessing the curriculum, but they don't alone lead to long-term academic success.
Exactly. That I do value accommodations and modifications as part of the journey while students are addressing the underlying concerns, and we don't want those accommodations and modifications to be a lifelong solution when there are other options available, and wherever there are other options available. I always think about it if we were thinking about medicine, and if our child had an injury, we maybe would want them using crutches or a wheelchair while their leg is recovering, and they would have support to to help them heal and recover, but we wouldn't want that to be the way they spent the rest of their life if there were options available. And for sure, there are situations where at this moment in time, maybe all the options we want aren't there, but if there are options available, then let's try to maximize them. So I really think about that for our children and their their brains, and because it's not just about their time in education, it's about their life and everything that we're doing in all these years while they're in school is preparing them for life. And if their whole journey in education has been spent utilizing accommodations and modifications and not closing the gap for them in their learning and trying to bring them up to what we would hope they would be doing and how they would be working and thinking at age appropriately, then they're not prepared for those next steps. And lots of times families on the journey, because I've had many meetings with families, especially when I was a superintendent of special education, where they just felt like doors are closing on them. And so if the time is spent with solely accommodations and modifications, then sadly, in many ways, there aren't as many doors opened. And that, post-secondary options may become more limited. The students might not be prepared and have the foundation of what they need to attend whatever program they're interested in university. And we're also seeing, after such a long period of time of an approach with fewer interventions, many adults entering the workplace and then really struggling that, employers have a duty to accommodate different disabilities. But if the work cannot be performed with reasonable accommodations in place, then it makes the job impossible, really, for the person. And so then we see the next step of the compromised mental health being the fallout of it. All of us want to do the best that we can and meet the expectations that are in front of us. And when we don't, it begins to eat away at us. And so, we're seeing that in many high school students, young adults, and then adults throughout all stages because of the challenges they're faced with in terms of living with a learning disability that hasn't been addressed to the degree that we would hope.
Yes. And I think about, as I'm hearing you talk, I think about, for example, dyslexia and ADHD. These are lifelong conditions that are often accommodated, but it's not enough from what I'm hearing you say and what I know from observing kids that have come through my practice. It's not enough to just give a child with ADHD preferential seating and extended time, or provide a child with dyslexia with access to audiobooks. We have to also incorporate interventions that change the brain and make reading, paying attention, and tuning out distractions easier for them.
Absolutely. And that is what Arrowsmith is about. When we have a student who's coming to us with a reading difficulty, whether it's diagnosed or undiagnosed, what we try to do is explore a little further which cognitive functions are creating that challenge. On the surface, the challenge might look similar, but everyone's cognitive profile is different. And so we really try to take a closer look at what their profile is, and then we take a neuroplastic approach to change by using specific cognitive exercises that utilize the principles of neuroplasticity to make cognitive change for the child or adult, and make reading possible and writing possible.
Yes. And you're a strong advocate, as am I, for harnessing neuroplasticity to really drive learning improvements. And for people listening who may not know what neuroplasticity is, Can you say a little bit about what that is and how it applies to education?
Yeah, for sure. So, neuroplasticity is our brain's ability to change. And that's what's really incredible about the brain. There was a time where people really viewed the brain as being fixed, and whatever you were born with, that's what you have. That's what you live with. That's the potential that you're going to live up to. But when we realize that the brain actually can change and grow and develop, that that what we did was look at science, and our founder Barbara Arrowsmith Young really researched neuroplasticity and looked at the different principles of how you support change in the brain, and what you're actually doing by engaging individuals in exercises or any type of task that promotes neuroplasticity is you're stimulating the brain, and the brain is actually rewiring itself and growing. Dendrites and neurons are firing, and the brain is wiring, and connections that weren't happening before are being created, and the pathways that support learning are stronger and then utilized to support further learning. And so, with all of our exercises, we know that for neuroplasticity to occur, you need sustained engagement in a task. It's not going to happen by just spending 30 seconds on a task. That we also know that there needs to be a challenge, but the challenge needs to be reachable and then gradually become more challenging. And so all of our tasks have our students working from a starting point where they can begin the task, and then as they master each task, it gets more and more challenging. And the thing that's different about, if we think about accommodations and a child actually mastering a task, is that we are having particular tasks that they need to perform, and they don't move on to the next task until they've achieved whatever that expectation is in front of them, that's being designed to wire a particular part of the brain. Where with accommodations or modifications, that the expectations may be lowered and not continue to be raised if there aren't some type of intervention in place that's supporting that growth and letting the child move from reading at a grade 2 level to reading at a grade 4 level to reading at a grade 8 level, and so on, where we see so many students by the time they are entering high school and they're reading still at a grade 2 or 3 level. And that's, often when we are hearing from families, because suddenly that realization, oh my goodness, my child's going into high school and this is where they're at. And, we welcome students of all ages, but as a lifelong educator, I really champion early intervention. When you recognize a concern, I want families to come, because it becomes more than just the disability. As I mentioned earlier, then it becomes self-esteem and a concern for well-being. And anyway.
Yes, no, and that makes perfect sense, because, what you're saying is that when you talk about neuroplasticity, it's really about the brain's ability to change. And when you talk about addressing learning differences, learning challenges at that level, it comes from an understanding that you're addressing the underlying issues that is causing the struggles for a child. So, we talked about reading difficulties. It could also be difficulties with math or difficulties with writing, right? If we just have a child dictate their essay to a parent and the parent writes it down, that is an accommodation, right? And if you shorten how much they are required to write, that could be a modification, but you don't actually address the underlying issue to improve that child's ability to write. And so it's not about doing one or the other. You do both, and you may need to do the dictation or have a scribe while they are building those skills. And building those skills happens through that process of cognitive training and neuroplasticity. They go hand in hand.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's why within our students program, those students who are attending full time, that they are spending 6 periods a day working on their the particular cognitive functions that have been recognized as areas of need, and they're working to strengthen them. But when they go to their English class and their math class, that they are then really working at their current instructional level and trying to build their reading and math abilities from where they're at. And what's wonderful is the gains that they're making in the cognitive program then shine through into their academic classroom, and we begin to see, really jumps in performance at times as students' cognitive gains are strengthened. And yeah, it is so very important. And even like when I think about I know that technology is really popular to be a recommendation for a student, and within schools, at least in Ontario, the ministry has really put a lot of funding behind technology for students. But again, that cannot just be the solution. The one thing is, a child or a teenager, any age, might not know the best way to use speech to text and text to speech, because it's not just as simple as that. What does it look like to edit a document, write a document when you're using speech to text? How do you make that occur in a classroom with 26 other students? Like, there's a whole learning experience that then needs to be built around utilizing those tools in a meaningful way. And those tools are fabulous when students do have the opportunity to use them correctly. But again, that we don't want that to be the lifelong solution, that we want that to be support while we're working on building the actual abilities to read and write.
Yes. And building those abilities, it feels very much like knowing that you can build those abilities really can empower parents and educators to rethink how we support students with learning differences.
Yes. Yeah. What's wonderful about our program is there are many educational systems around the world that are incorporating the Arrowsmith program into as an offering or a support within their school. There's a number of private schools in Spain have decided that depending on the grade, students are working on different cognitive functions, like maybe the symbol relations cognitive function at the grade 3 level, motor symbol sequencing at the grade 1 level, quantification sense at the grade 2 level, recognizing that these programs can benefit all. And then, like Australia, their system widely uses the Arrowsmith program, and same within New Zealand. I'm located in Toronto, and I'm wishing our education system, which has this sitting right in their backyard, would be utilizing it. And yeah, because it does make learning possible, and that's what we want for our kids.
Yes, and there's so much research support for cognitive training impacting learning and having positive outcomes. We see it in a number of areas. I just gave a talk on executive functioning. It was one of the areas that we know can have a significant impact on improving executive functioning skills in students. At the same time, there's often skepticism around the idea of cognitive functions being improved. So many people offer programs, and I think that's why it's so important to be looking for programs that have evidence to support it, which Arrowsmith does. You want evidence-based approaches and not just someone who says, hey, I have this program that can improve your attention 98% in 4 weeks.
Right. Yes. Yes. And we would never make that statement, right? Because we know that it takes time to make change. We do have a summer program that we offer that's a 6-week program and very intensive within specific to one exercise, and which actually does have a lot of benefits for executive functioning concerns and processing and comprehension. But even, students will benefit from that 6-week period, and some, depending on their profile, might feel that that's the boost they need. But students with more significant needs, we know that in 6 weeks, and we share that with families, that 6 weeks is going to be the start of the journey, not the full journey. And Barbara's school has been running for over 40 years. And if you think about what's happened in science in that time, that she was really a pioneer in the thinking around neuroplasticity within an educational program and utilizing it in this way. And so you can bet at that time there was a lot of skepticism and challenges that she went through. And we're always engaged in research. We work with numerous universities. We continue to. We work with some mental health organizations because some of our work is really showing benefits with related to addictions and mental health. But yeah, we really value research and work with many professionals and doctors in seeing how we can take this further, right? With traumatic brain injury, like I said, addictions, mental health. It's our brain is there and engaged in all of those things. So the more we can enhance it, we see the benefits in so many ways.
I hope that you are enjoying my conversation with Shelley. If your child is experiencing learning challenges, help them move beyond the reduced expectations and accommodations to solutions and independence at Arrowsmith School in person or online. The Arrowsmith program utilizes principles of neuroplasticity to strengthen students' learning capacity for success in academics, critical thinking, executive functioning, and social emotional learning. Position your child for a brighter future today. Learn more at school.arrowsmith.ca. Now, back to my conversation with Shelley. Now, Shelley, what does a neuroplasticity-based learning intervention actually look like in the classroom? Like, how is that integrated into a student's classroom experience? Because I think when parents think about school, they think about the traditional, what I think, a teacher at the front of the classroom or in the center of the classroom, teaching the lesson on reading, writing, or math. How does this neuroplasticity-based approach get integrated into the classroom setting?
Great question. When I first read Barbara Arrowsmith Young's book, The Woman Who Changed Her Brain, that not too long after that, I came and visited the school because I wanted to know just that.
Yes.
So if you were to come into our school or into any site that's utilizing the Arrowsmith program, you would see students engaged in an individualized program. They might be working on the same cognitive function, let's say a motor symbol sequence, for example. So a cognitive function that supports our ability to write, to take ideas from our head and put them out the end of our pen or pencil, that supports spelling. But when I'm looking at a student, I might see one is working on one particular level of the exercise, another is working on another exercise, and that cognitive exercise really is a pencil paper type task, or it's actually a marker for one part of it and a pen for another, and for intentional reasons for that. Other students would be engaged in maybe a symbol relations exercise, and that which we commonly will hear in the classroom as referred to as clocks. And if you explored this exercise, you would think, how on earth did she ever come to think about a clock in this way and come up with this? But it's an exercise that individuals of all ages, professionals who are struggling in the workplace with executive functioning or reading comprehension, reading volumes of emails, often take this program themselves, because we offer it in an independent way as well. But our students in the classroom are working on different levels, trying to master their current level. They can look at one aspect of this one's computer based. They can look at one aspect of their screen and see what their engagement is occurring through the day, what their goal is set for that exercise. Are they achieving the goal? Our teachers can see in live time in the tablet how much work the student is doing, which helps us help them continue to remain focused and continue to move through the exercise. You might see some celebration around because somebody's mastered, and our students, because they know the work and effort that's involved in mastering a level, that they're the biggest champions for one another. And you might see lots of interaction happening between a student and a teacher, with information being shared back and forth and feedback being given to the student in a way that's not giving them the answer. They then have to still go and figure it out, but it's giving them something that lets them know that you've got a little further to go before you can master this particular task. But it's all very personalized, and everyone's program is reflective of whatever the needs are within their own cognitive profile. And it's incredible to see the different ways that students are having their needs addressed. And when we think about reading, there are multiple cognitive functions involved in reading. So they might have within their schedule where they're working on 3 of those functions because they have been identified as areas of need, where someone else with a difficulty in reading might be working on 2 of those functions and another one that's not strong enough within their cognitive profile.
Right. And that's where the personalization
Absolutely
is so fantastic, because students are getting exactly what they need to develop based on their unique cognitive profile. And it seems like, this is the future of education. When you see education in the future going, where do you see it going when it comes to integrating neuroscience and cognitive training?
Yeah, that these kind of journeys in education can be so slow, right? That in 30 years of education, when I think about, all of the different, as we were beginning to recognize the role that the brain played in education, it was, more about learning styles and emotional intelligences. And where I have started to feel some hope, and even more recognizing that people are seeing the brain learning connection, is when the value of growth mindset and mindfulness within education. So I feel like we're just on the cusp of recognizing
I completely agree.
Neuroplasticity belongs in education. And so, that when we can get there, we will be able to better meet the needs of our students. That it's when we think about innovation, that there are innovative programs. Our program, though it's been around for 40 years and has evolved in many ways. Lots of initially, all of the tasks were paper and pencil, but now many of them are computer based. Data was calculated by hand. Now it happens within the teacher's tablet. Like all of those things and advancements, even within Barbara's program, makes it more manageable in a more typical classroom. And that I'm really hoping that we get to that day where we are in, we can still figure out how we're going to accommodate and modify for the child while they're working on changing their brain for cognitive gains and, for life success. The other thing that's different about our program is because the functions contribute to many different tasks, that if I'm working on, say, for example, again, I'll just mention the symbol relations cognitive function, that when I work on that function, I'm going to see benefits in reading, in math, in processing, in making connections, like that, because that function isn't just a function that's targeting, math specifically, that when I work on that function, my world can benefit in many ways. I'm going to find many aspects of my life easier to it's the program, like I said, that our students do in their summer camp. And what's funny is that parents are suddenly realizing, oh my gosh, my child's able to beat me in this game, game of cards or checkers or chess, because now they're thinking at a different level. They can understand humor. That isn't the goal when they came in here, was I want my child to understand jokes better. But it makes life a lot more fun when they can understand jokes. And but what's wonderful is they're also understanding what they're reading at a much better level, and understanding word problems in math at a much better level. So yeah.
Yes. And when, kids are in your classrooms, they're working with you and they're working with these programs, are there things that caregivers can do to support the cognitive change that they're working on in the academic environment? Are there things that they can do at home, exercises, routines, habits to strengthen the cognitive functions outside of the school?
Yeah, no, definitely. That specific to our own program, the students can work on some of their exercises from home, but also we have a parent dashboard, so the parents can log in and see how their child's doing, and then they can play a role in the encouragement, right? Where our program is not intended to be a lifetime program. We want students to come in, and whether when we look at their profile, that we think they need to be here for a year or 2 years or 3 to 5 years, that we want them to make the most of this time. So specific to us, our parents are playing that role in making sure, supporting, working with teachers, in encouraging the students to engage. But also, if we just think about, when a student's learning a sport, and if they're really wanting to learn how to play that sport well, then they're not just going to go in and play the sport well. You're going to break it down. You're going to look at the specific tasks. You're going to master this aspect of holding your hockey stick, or how to stand on your blades, and that repetitive, like neuroplasticity is happening all the time when we're learning new things. And so if we think about a sport and how children advance through learning a new sport, the ability to skate, that's challenging. That's one I'm still working on. It's similar to that. So, working with your child at home and just day-to-day things, looking at what's the first level of the task and mastering that, rather than feeling like they need to move through a whole task without mastering at the earliest level of that, and then taking on the next little level of challenge of that task. That's how I think about it in everyday life. And those benefits too, like when children play sports, it benefits other aspects of their life as well. If they can think on the ice and process quickly on the ice, they're going to transfer that somewhere else. Or if, working with our program, you're strengthening your brain here, you're going to see the benefits in other aspects of your life as well. We have a student in our online program in the States who is playing soccer at a highly competitive on the national team for under 18, and just the feedback from her family on the abilities of how her game has changed, and they really attribute it to her work and her advancing to that level, have attributed that to the work that she's been doing, not fully, of course, but some of the work she's been doing with us. So it's powerful.
It is. It's powerful. It's exciting. It's innovative, and it's the future. It's the future. I mean, Shelley, you've given us so much to think about when it comes to moving beyond accommodations and modifications and really tapping into the power of neuroplasticity for true academic and cognitive growth. I cannot thank you enough for joining me today. If listeners want to learn more about Arrowsmith's approach in Arrowsmith School, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
If they want to connect with me directly, just emailing me at shelley.woon@arrowsmith.ca. And but also, we've got a wealth of information on our site, arrowsmith.ca, and there's a link that goes right into our school site, giving more just about our own school. But because Arrowsmith can be accessed worldwide, lots of professionals want to learn about it, so they can bring it to their own students or clients or families. And that there's a wealth of information there.
Yes, there's a lot of great research, and you've written a lot of blogs and participate in a lot of media events. So I will definitely put a link to the website and your email address in the show notes. Thank you again, Shelley.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Karen. I really have valued this time together, and I hope that it'll benefit some of your listeners and the people they support as well.
I know it will. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks to everyone who tuned in today. I appreciate you joining us. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really helps us reach more families and educators. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.